So here is the last lecture of the semester. It's social media and psychology. And this lecture, it may come off a little bit negative towards social media. Now, there's wonderful and great things that social media have given us. And I'm sure you know those things. You know how it connects you to people that maybe you've lost touch with and whatnot. It gives you insight into other people's lives. It gives you information that you may not have known. But there's also some detrimental things that can happen in relation to social media and just general psychological well-being. So we're going to move forward on those things. Usually when someone first discovers social media, whether you're a teenager or whether you're like my mom and you're older and you finally get, like my mom gets an iPad and discovers Facebook and then discovers that she can kind of key in on the rest of the world. And they live in a very rural place. And so she enjoys it. But the more you stay onto it, the more that you realize, ooh, this has consequences too. You feel excited, motivated at first to deepen relationships, but then you kind of realize that all hell breaks loose also through social media. That you can get exposed to things from people that you would not have been exposed to before. It's all politics and ideologies and religion and everything like that maybe you didn't want to know about another person, but you end up knowing it anyway. So, and we're using Facebook as an example just because it's been around the longest. And therefore it kind of makes it the most well-studied. And in terms of psychology, it really is kind of the most studied because there's so much that happens inside of Facebook, or that can happen inside of Facebook, that maybe you can't interact with the same way in Twitter or in Instagram or Snapchat or whatever. So what have we seen so far in terms of research with all this stuff? Well, people who use Facebook longest were more likely to agree that others were happier and had better lives. So there you go. Let's hit you with that one first. People who use Facebook for the longest amount of time, in other words, people who are heavy users and have been users for a long time, when asked, they're more likely to agree that other people are happier and have better lives than them. Well, why is that? And you can imagine it's because we're always looking at other people's lives as they've been presented on Facebook and comparing our lives against that. Well, most of the time people are posting happy moments on Facebook, right? So you can kind of see how that would skew things. Those that had Facebook friends that they don't really know agreed more that others had better lives. So in other words, not only is it just because you've used it the longest and you use it the most, but we also tend to see a correlation, which is odd, that the people who have the most friends will say that others are happier than them. This kind of makes sense in that, well, hey, if you've used Facebook for the longest time and you have you use it all the time, you probably have a lot of Facebook friends. But it also makes sense in another way, in that the more people that are there for you to compare yourself to, the more damage that does to how you evaluate your own life. Feeling excluded from one's social connections has been seen to lead to decreases in psychological well-being. So if you have a network, this is just social psychology research that we know from the past. If you have a network of friends and you tend to continuously be left out of that network, you tend not to be happy. You start questioning, why do I not get invited to these things? Why am I not being allowed to participate? So online vulnerability is The capacity to experience detriments to one's psychological, reputational, or physical well-being as a result of the experiences that they may encounter in online activities. We all know someone who gets their feelings hurt at the drop of a hat, right? And so when they see things online that upsets them, they fly off the handle quicker. That's what we mean by online vulnerability. It's kind of this innate personality characteristic that you have that says, okay, well, if I see something online that I don't agree with or that makes me feel lonely or something like that, I'm usually more impacted by it than others. That's your sense of online vulnerability. How often does what you see online that upsets you, how often is that encountering? Or how often is that occurring, rather? How often are you getting upset because of something? That's a measure of your online vulnerability. Online practices, including self-disclosure and the accumulation of large, unmanageable online networks, have been known to contribute to online vulnerability. In other words, if you're self-disclosing all the time, if you're telling people stuff on Facebook that really is probably best left to yourself, and we all know those people, the ones that cannot stop talking about something horrible that's happened to them, or even if they're bragging about great things all the time, or if we know people that just seem to have huge networks of Facebook friends. You look and you say, 3,000 Facebook friends. Well, there's no way that they have meaningful relationships with all 3,000 of those people. But again, if you have these huge networks, it's much more likely that you're going to see something in those networks that makes you feel inadequate about yourself, right? We know that increases in SNS use, and so SNS basically is just an abbreviation for social network systems, okay, or social network software, however you want to phrase it. It's SNS is Facebook, is Twitter, is Snapchat, is Instagram. We know that increases in social network use lead to increases in online vulnerability, which in turn lead to decreases in self-esteem. So this is kind of like a little model that makes sense to us then. The more you use a social network, the more open you are to online vulnerability. And because you're more open to that online vulnerability, and because you use it all the time, guess what? You start to think less about yourself. So that increase in use leads to an increase in vulnerability because you're being exposed to more of it, in which turns to decreases in self-esteem. Then we have this thing called FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. A lot of work has been done on this recently, talking about why we are so addicted and engaged with social networking now that it's a popular thing online. Well, fear of missing out has come as one of these theoretical reasons as to why we're always engaging with social network sites. FOMO is the pervasive apprehension that others might be having rewarding experiences from which one is absent. In other words, why do you check Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat? Why do you check this all the time? Because you're afraid that you're missing out on something that you don't want to miss out on. Hey, someone's going to the movies, someone's having a party, someone's at talking about a concert that's coming up that they want to go to. Don't you want to go to that concert too? It's this fear that someone somewhere that you know is having lots of fun and you're missing out on it. So that tomorrow when you all get together and someone says, oh, that party was great last night, and you didn't know about the party, you didn't go to the party, Everyone else was experiencing that party and having an awesome time. And it makes you feel bad because you were able to see exactly how awesome of a time they were having. So there's no doubt that this FOMO is characterized by this desire to stay continually connected with what others are doing. I want to know. I want to be connected. Stands to reason that that's what happens. Okay. We know that increased use of social networking sites leads to increased levels of FOMO. So the more you use Facebook, the more you use Twitter, we see a correlation with having this fear of missing out, right? Kind of makes sense. Now, the way that this was phrased in the research was that social networking use leads to increased levels of FOMO. Well, I wonder if we could reverse that relationship just as easily and say increased levels of FOMO lead to more social networking site use. I mean, it's these two things. I'm not sure which is the chicken and which is the egg in terms of which comes first here, but they're tied hand in hand. Increased SNS means increased levels of FOMO, right? Increases in fear of missing out correspond to increases in network size, profile data, and emotional disclosure. So what you see is that now it starts to become a brutal loop. And it really can be. If you've ever known anyone who's just hung up on looking at Facebook and commenting on, what's going on in the pictures and all that. Well, look at so and so; they're having a party. Look at what's going on here. Look at the more they look, the more they become afraid that they're missing out on something. The more they become afraid that they're missing out on something, well, then they want to expand their network, right? They want to tell more people about stuff that's going on in their lives. They want to have more information about themselves online. They want others to like them. So they put more out, right? I'm afraid of missing out on stuff. Therefore, I want to grow my network so that I see what everybody is doing, not just a small group of people that I'm interested in, but everybody. And in order to capture all of these people in my network, I need to give them more information about myself. So and we know from what we just said, more information about yourself, checking these sites more often, doing all this ends up leading to decreases in self-esteem. So you end up not feeling as good about yourself because you're wanting more and more and more and putting out more and more and more, and it's creating this vicious cycle. Individuals rating low in efficacy, autonomy, and connectedness report higher levels of FOMO. So what is that? What is efficacy? Efficacy means your belief in your capabilities, right? So efficacy means basically this how well you think you can do at things, right? Well, and think of it this word. Think of the word effective. That's efficacy. How effective are you? So if you have low ratings or low feelings of efficacy, I can't do anything right. Oh, I'd like to do that, but I'm sure I'd fail at it. Oh, I've tried that before and it's not gone well. Autonomy, in other words, I can't really do that by myself. I need help. Let me keep asking for help on this instead of figuring out by myself, right? Low ratings of connectedness. In other words, I may have 3,000 Facebook friends, but I don't really talk to anybody during the day. I don't really feel connected. There's not a community that I feel that I belong in. So if you got all that going on, low efficacy, low autonomy, low connectedness, you have higher levels of FOMO, right? You're fearing that you're missing out more and more and more and more. And you don't feel good about yourself, more importantly. Individuals experiencing deficits in social needs, as a result of FOMO might be more likely to seek out increased social capital through the accumulation of larger online networks. Again, the response when you have more of something that's detrimental because of social network use, the response typically is more, 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 more. I want bigger networks. I want to disclose more. I want to share more things. So if you feel like you're being lonely, if you feel like you've withdrawn, you don't have a community, and a lot of that is based on all this social media use and all this FOMO that's happening. And I know FOMO gets to be just this really weird kind of strange word, but it just sounds funny coming out of your mouth. But if all that's happening, again, the typical response of the average person is more. I need more. I want to do more. I want to be more. I want to put out more information to everyone else, more friends, more photos. Because again, you're afraid that you're missing out on something. Why are you afraid that you're missing out on something? Because you think you don't have connections. Right? So, maybe the reason I don't know about this party is because I don't have enough friends in my social network that went to that party. Well, I need to go out and find more friends. Oh, I want to be part of this group. I keep missing out on what this group is doing, and I want to be part of it. So anybody who has anything to do with that group, let me friend them, right? But there's really no connectedness there. And what you're doing is reinforcing the fact that I'm just not being included in these other things. Narcissism. What about narcissism? Narcissism, of course, is this highly inflated, grandiose, and this positive but unrealistic self-concept that you may have. It's strongly related to online self-presentation and promotion, and it's positively related to addictive use of social media. In other words, the people who are online on social networks the most and who are constantly posting things about themselves tend to have these grandiose beliefs about themselves. They're narcissistic. I used to have a student who did exactly what the next bullet point is down here. Research argues individuals who post selfies are more likely to be perceived by others as narcissistic. Yes. This was in the early days of Facebook. And I'm talking about 2009, 2010, maybe somewhere around in there. May have been a little bit later, but it's in the very early days of Facebook. I had a student who had 3,000 photos uploaded. And the more I looked through those photos, the more I noticed these are all pictures of herself. And she's posing in the same stance. She's hand on the hip, knees bent slightly and angled to one side. She was posing. These weren't just, someone captured me in a fun moment. It was, I am posing for the camera. We went to the beach not too long ago, and I was watching with my daughter and laughing at the fact that there were two like preteen or early teenage girls that were playing right as the waves came in, right there. They were taking photos of one another, and they were, moving their hair to exactly where they wanted it to be. They were doing that little pose where they bend their knees and they're trying to fake and so she's smiling or she laughs out loud just once, while someone takes the picture of her. They're trying to kind of like do a professional photo shoot, and they're not professional photographers. But it's all about this image. What can I put out there for people? How can I make myself look the best? And when you're putting 3,000 of those images out, yeah, you're probably narcissistic, and other people probably view you as narcissistic. At the beach that day, I certainly looked at those two individuals and thought, wow, you two really love yourself. You're really a bunch of narcissists. So, if you've got a Facebook account and 60% of the photos that you have are selfies, I'm not saying you're a narcissist, but I can guarantee you there's other people out there that believe you are. In 2016, it was estimated that 93 million selfies were taken worldwide each day. Also, 1,000 selfies were posted to Instagram every 10 seconds. Compared to men, women post twice as many selfies on social media and are more likely to post selfies of all types. And so we'll wind up, I'm not going to comment on the male versus female thing there. That's just what the research shows. Now, do guys like to look at themselves on social media? Oh yeah, you betcha. But research there in 2016 was finding that women post more often selfies than men. So the thing that we start to worry about now is, are people getting addicted to social media? Are they getting to a point where it's hard for them to operate outside of being online? And most certainly I can tell you that it's a concern that I have just with my children and screen time. The fact that, if you really want to punish them, the way you do that is you take away their access to screens, whether it be their cell phone or their video game system or television or whatever, Netflix. If you take that away, you're destroying their lives. And a lot of us feel like we need to look at Facebook every 10 minutes. What's happened now? What's happened now? What's happened now? And of course, if we have that fear of missing out and we're constantly checking Facebook every 10 minutes, Twitter every 10 minutes, if we're constantly engaging in that behavior, it's just a matter of time before that behavior becomes an addictive behavior. There's a lot of people that will say, but it's not addiction because there's no chemical craving like you would have for a drug. But some people say, well, maybe there's not a chemical that you need, but there's something that you need and you're getting from looking at social media. So what do we know about addiction and how we've typically defined addiction? Well, you can ask yourself, are you preoccupied by social media? That means salience. Are you always thinking about it? Are you using social media in order to reduce negative feelings? So if you feel uncomfortable or sad or bored or anxious, do you pull open Facebook or Twitter or something like that to occupy your time, to elevate your mood, to get you thinking better, to get you feeling happier? Are you gradually using social media more and more in order to get the same pleasure from it? So, in other words, maybe you used to check Facebook 2 or 3 times a day. Now you're checking it 2 or 3 times an hour. Have you built up a tolerance so that you need to see what it's doing all the time? You suffer distress if you're prohibited from using social media. So if you go somewhere and you don't have a wireless signal, if your cell phone's not working, if the Wi-Fi is not working, if you can't get a signal, do you just feel bad? Do you feel uneased and uncomfortable because you can't check it? So that's a withdrawal effect. Are you sacrificing other obligations and are causing harm to other important life areas because of social media use? In other words, so other things that you should be doing in your life, are you not doing them because you feel like you need to be on social media? Are you missing out on things? Not fear of missing out, but actually missing out. You know, do you sit there and look at Facebook or Twitter so much that you realize, oh crap, I should have been eating lunch, and now I don't have enough time? So are you desiring or attempting to control the use of social media without success? In other words, do you tell yourself, well, I'm going to get off Facebook. I just don't like Facebook. I'm going to get off of it. And you're off for a few days, and then you get back on. Or you say, oh, I'm going to delete my account. And then 2 weeks later, you decide, no, I need to reactivate that account. These are all symptoms and characteristics of addiction. You can substitute social media with narcotics or drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or anything else that you become addicted to. You substitute that, it's the same thing. Who's most likely to be addicted? We tend to find it more in younger people than older. Usually more women than men say they're addicted to their phone. And people that are lower in self-esteem. Well, is it the lowness in self-esteem that's driving the addiction, or is it the addiction that's driving low self-esteem? Again, these things tend to go hand in hand. We know that people with low self-esteem regard social media as a safer place to express themselves. So that's another aspect to this. If you don't feel comfortable talking about politics, religion, expressing your belief system, if you don't feel comfortable doing that in public, maybe it's easier for you to do that online. And we certainly, I'm sure you know some people, I can think of one of my friends, that they'll hardly ever talk to you if you're hanging out with them. But once they're online, they just seem to chat. And that's a self-esteem issue. It implies that people that use social media do so in order to obtain higher self-esteem. So the implication there is, well, it's difficult for me to talk in public, but if I do it online, which is easier for me, I boost my self-concept. So you can see how, again, this is kind of a cyclical process, and it leads to people just being more and more engaged with social media, which doesn't help person's psychological well-being overall. So that is our last lecture of the semester. Thank you all for paying attention, and I'll see you in class.